Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Fluff It, a podcast for furries by furries. My name is Felix, and I am a wolf from the United States.
And my name is Uno, and I'm a raccoon from the United Kingdom.
Welcome back, everyone, and to our new viewers, welcome. We are very excited to talk about today's episode, but before that, we want to first say welcome to our new viewers from Australia and Germany.
Yeah, it's really exciting to hear that we've got listeners coming in from pretty much all over the place now. It's just really interesting to hear where everyone's from. And I really hope that you're all enjoying the podcast so far.
I hope so too. Now, Uno, what are we going to be discussing today?
So today, the topic that we're discussing today is commissioning art and doing commissions. So we're going to kind of split this up into two sections. So we're going to talk about the artist perspective, as in the artist or the fursuit maker or digital artist who's actually doing the commission, and the customer or the commissioner's perspective and kind of how things work from their side. So kind of getting a bit of a view from both sides. And I would like to say thank you to IceWolf121 on Instagram, who's a good friend of mine, who has given us a couple of ideas for topics that we can talk about on today's episode. So yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you. So, Uno, you've done a lot of art and fursuit commissions. So how would you recommend artists start when they want to do commissions?
So really the first thing you need to think about is what type of commission you want to do. So whether that's art, fursuits, both, and also even kind of thinking even further into it, what kind of subgenre of that. So if you're doing art, do you want to do sketches? Do you want to do full body drawings? There's so much to it. So you need to kind of decide what type of commissions you want to do, which should be fairly straightforward. Just go with what you feel confident in and what you think you can do well. And then you really need to look at pricing your work, which I think can be very, very difficult because it's so easy to undercharge, especially when you're first starting out. But it's also easy to overcharge because, I mean, well, not necessarily overcharge, but people might think that you're overcharging because, I mean, there's so much work that goes into art that you want to make it worth your while. So it's about finding that balance between how much are you going to charge. You don't want it to be too cheap that it's not worth your while, but you also don't want it to be so expensive that nobody can afford it. So it can be quite tricky, I think, at times.
Yeah, I can definitely see that when it comes to pricing your artwork because you don't want to overprice someone, but at the same time, you don't want to underprice yourself. You do have a few people that don't really quite understand how long it takes for some artists to do their art projects. A simple cartoon artwork could still take a few hours depending on the complexity, the colors, and the types of poses, values implemented in the artwork.
Yeah, I totally agree because I mean, there's just so much that goes into it. When I first began fursuit commissions, I made them very cheap, which was partly because I wasn't as confident as I am now, and my work probably wasn't as good as it is now. So I probably wasn't undercharging too much, but I do remember things just taking me a very long time, and there's so much work that goes into it. And after a while, it did get to a point where, because I was in university at the time, I remember talking to one of my tutors, and he basically told me that I was just undercharging way too much, and just he kind of told me to sort of think about how long does it actually take and how much materials do you need to buy for it, and there's just so much that goes into it. So think about your pricing and give it some thought and take your time to decide how much you want to charge. And I think also just factoring in things like materials or mostly time as well, just the amount of time and effort. And then there's the fact as well that when you're doing commissions for a long time or for a few years or a few months even, you can put your prices up over time. I've definitely done that as my work's improved. So don't feel like you've always got to stick to the same pricing, especially as your work gets better over time.
Yeah, definitely. With increasing prices, I mean, if you, the artist, are seeing demand go up and up, definitely charge a little bit more because it's supply and demand because you don't want to do too many artworks that will take up too much of your time. And if you're gonna have the popularity and the demand for your commissions, your artwork, definitely spike up the prices a little bit. The one thing I definitely would caution artists, as if they're fursuit makers, illustrators, writers, is make sure that you're managing your workload, especially if you're doing this a lot, because this, while this is very much a job for a bunch of furries and a bunch of artists, is freelance commissions, you don't want to overwork yourself, and you definitely want to make sure that you're give yourself a lot of time to relax still and have fun, because you definitely, like any other job, if you overwork, you're definitely going to feel it.
Yeah, I totally cannot stress enough how important that is, because I've fallen into that trap so many times. I've been a freelance artist for years now, since 2017. And to be honest, I'm only just learning to give myself more free time. Because the kind of trap that I would used to fall into a lot was, because I work from home, I would just kind of work all day, work all night, and then my time off would be kind of whenever I went to a con, or like if I went out with friends or something, I would kind of class that as my time off, and just never really gave myself time to sort of unwind at home as well, which is really important. And I really didn't realize how important that was until I kind of overworked myself way too much and ended up burning myself out on work. And ended up just feeling really stressed, which is not what you want. So, but I mean, it's a good thing I can say at least that I'm better at that now. But it can be very difficult. I think, especially as well as a lot of artists and fursuit makers, we really enjoy what we do. Like I love making fursuits and doing artwork. So it is really easy for me to just feel like doing it all the time and not giving myself time off. But then you do feel the effects of not giving yourself the time off. So that's just really important to remember. A good kind of piece of advice is to sort of set yourself hours. So now I tend to work from about 10 until about 6. So I have like, I'll usually wake up around 8 or 9. So I have sort of time to get ready, and then I'll work through the day, maybe have a lunch break. And then in the evening, I just kind of have the time to do whatever. So whether that's hanging out with friends or just kind of chilling at home or whatever. And I just think that, like, as soon as I got into that, it kind of worked so much better for me. But it's so hard sometimes to just like remember that you need to have your own time.
Yeah, definitely give yourself time off. I mean, one thing I definitely have learned from my writing professors is that you're not going to write well if you don't experience life, and you definitely want to go out there, take time off, enjoy time alone or with friends, because that will re-energize you, and that could very well inspire you to come up with something new for artwork. It's one of the best ways to get out of art block, but I digress on that. Now, the one thing I do wonder about when you do commissions is, how do you find a balance between styles and customers' characters? Because every artist has a distinct style, some more toony, some more realistic. So, Uno, since you do a lot of more toony type artworks, how would you find a balance if someone with a more realism character was asked, "Hey, can you draw this, please?"
Yeah, well, I've definitely had quite a few commissions where people will come to me with kind of a realistic reference sheet, but with my art being like really cartoony, I think obviously most people will probably choose to commission me because they like my style. So usually their character, even if it is more of a realism kind of style, it'll usually be not too difficult to translate, because I would imagine that when they decide to commission me, they'll kind of have it in their head that this is going to be translated into like a cartoony style. But it can be quite tricky sometimes. I've definitely had a few commissions where the reference sheet has been really realistic, and it can be quite hard to translate. It's never impossible. It's always quite a fun challenge to do, but it can be quite like tricky at times. For advice for that, I'm not really sure what I'd say. It's mostly just stick to kind of the species. So, for example, if their character was like a big cat, like a lion or something, think about how you would draw a lion in your style and translate their design, so their color scheme, their markings, whatever kind of quirks that their character has, and put it into how you would draw that species, if that makes sense. I mean, this isn't necessarily, you don't have to follow this advice, but that's kind of what I do. Um, so, for example, canine characters, I have kind of quite a distinct canine style. So, if somebody commissions me to draw a canine character, I'll kind of look at what unique features does that character have? So if they have a different hairstyle, if they have horns, piercings, different eyes, anything like that, or a specific expression even. And I'll try and translate that into how I would draw a canine character, but put all of these kind of character quirks into it to make it their character and not just like a generic shell of like a Ampro character. But yeah, that's really what I can say about that from my own experience. I definitely think most people will commission you knowing your style and knowing what it's going to kind of turn out like. You do get the occasional person who will ask for something that's in a style out of your own, which really is up to you whether you want to take on that commission. I've definitely done it before, but it can sometimes it can be a really good challenge, but then sometimes it can run into some problems when you're trying to work in a style that isn't yours. So do try to develop your own style and stick to your style as much as you can.
Yep. Yeah, with art styles, it's very distinct and it's very important to have, but if you're still trying to develop a style, don't worry, because over time, with more practice, have an art style that you like and that you're used to drawing, that you're comfortable with. But you can also have more than one style. I have two different styles. I do picture book type illustrations, as well as general cartoony, toony anthro characters. But that kind of leads into an important part from the artist's perspective is creating a terms of service. Eventually, over time, you might get someone that might ask you to draw something that maybe you're not comfortable with or you're not so sure about. So, how would you create a terms of service, Uno?
Yeah, so terms of service, it's quite simple, really. It just takes a bit of thinking about. For me, this isn't necessarily how I think everyone does it, but for me, I kind of split it into two sections. So I kind of think about what are the professional things that need to be done for everyone who's doing commissions. So that would be things like accept the payment before you make a start, or at least get a down payment. Kind of like things like it's kind of hard to think off the top of my head now, but definitely when it comes to things like pricing and sort of the kind of sounds very boring, but the more kind of legal agreement within commissions as you are kind of selling an object or a piece of art. So think about the sort of important, boring stuff that you need to have. So the payments, how your process is, so keeping them updated and stuff. And then the other kind of section to think about is you personally as an artist. So what are you comfortable with doing and drawing? So, for example, maybe you really like drawing Ampro characters, but maybe you can't draw humans and you don't feel comfortable doing them on commission. So maybe because that is more of a personal thing to you, so maybe put that in the terms of services, like we'll draw Ampro characters, but we'll not draw human characters, or maybe you will draw like kind of fan characters, or you might not draw robots, just depending on whatever you're comfortable with drawing or what you feel confident enough doing on commission. And I would say the same, under the same kind of section would come the deadlines. So I personally don't really like working to deadlines if I can help it. However, if somebody has like a specific deadline, like for example, if they wanted a suit for Halloween or for a convention, if they kind of ask me and it seems doable, I will be able to do it. So maybe think about that. You could either put won't work to deadlines or ask about deadlines. There's so many ways to do it. It's kind of hard to describe, but I think what I'm getting at is like it's the kind of professional important things and also the kind of unique things to you as an artist. So what you can and can't do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes absolutely a ton of sense. I mean, you definitely want to put your terms of service down on either Word or on paper and make sure that everyone can see it, because occasionally you can have that cranky customer and you have your
Yeah.
terms of service to say, hey, you agreed to this. I can't really help you. You agreed to this. So I don't know what to say to you, because it can
Yeah.
definitely be a little frustrating. I can just feel for many artists because like over 90% of people, I just feel like commission with no problem. But you do occasionally have people that aren't so graceful of the process or the artist in general. So it can be a little frustrating, a little bit, or maybe a ton.
Yeah, I I totally agree because you really need the terms of service. It needs to be detailed enough to have all the information, but you kind of want to keep it fairly simple so that people aren't put off reading it. Because if possible, you do want the majority of your customers at least to read through it or at least scan over it just to kind of know what they're agreeing to. And most of them will do because obviously it's as important to them as it is to you because they're paying for something and you're providing that thing. So hopefully the majority of customers, I mean, personally, the majority of customers I have are absolutely fine. I very rarely have a problem. But I think with doing commissions for so many years, you are going to get the odd occasion where someone just won't read something or they'll just get mixed up about something. So it's just helpful to have that. So now that we've kind of covered the artist's perspective, we'd like to move on to the commissioner's perspective or the customer's perspective. So this is kind of from the other side, just kind of how the customer looks at things. So one of the most important things to do when you want to commission a piece of artwork or a fursuit is do your research. So look into makers, artists. It's very important thing to do. So Felix, like, how would you say is a good way to go about researching artists and choosing an artist to commission?
So researching is pretty straightforward. If you want to find artists that you like their art style, you also want to research artists that you've seen. Okay, they do commissions, and people are generally very happy with the reception of the artist. Because occasionally you might run into an artist that might be a little bit too pricey for you, or maybe the artist has had a few issues in the past. These are rare, but typically for me, when I research artists, it really comes down to the art style, if I like their art style, and then the pricing. Because while I don't mind spending a little bit on artwork, I definitely don't want to spend too much. But that's mainly because I'm a college student currently and I can't burn my entire bank account on art. But when it comes to choosing a commission type, very similar thing is it comes down to the pricing and what I think I want to see from the artist. If the artist I feel does a lot of really cool outfit designs, I would probably want to commission an outfit design. Or if I really like the icons or caricatures that they do, that might be something I might consider. It's like maybe I want them to draw maybe one of my more wild characters. But that does lead to providing a good reference and description of your character. Now, with that, I mean, for a lot of people, it can be a little bit challenging at times, especially when you're not really an artist yourself at times, depending on who you are and what you're commissioning. So, but it definitely helps the artist with how they draw the character, especially if they're doing something that's not a drawing, more like a costume. Correct me if I'm wrong, Uno, but you find it a lot easier if you have a front, side, and back reference for a character.
Yeah, yeah,
And so I would definitely recommend giving them references, but also give them flat colored references too, because if a lot of your
yeah.
characters' artworks are very valued and very shaded, it can be a little bit challenging for an artist to pick a base color and your character might look a little bit different. So, in your free time, if you do have a persona already or a character in mind, definitely research flat colors and send those to the artist if to help them out a little bit more.
Yeah, I totally agree. So a good reference is super important for any type of commission, to be honest. And one thing I would kind of like to just add on to that, if you don't have a reference sheet and you're wanting to actually commission your first reference sheet, or just a reference sheet for a character who doesn't have one, the best way to go about that is to provide just a really good description. So I've been commissioned for reference sheets before of a character that's just never been drawn before. And I'll kind of ask them to provide me with like just the best description they can give me of what they want. So I recently did a commission of a character that was a macaw. They actually sent me, yeah, they sent me like a very, very good detailed description of how they wanted the character, what his kind of personality was like. as well as pictures of an actual macaw, which were really helpful because the markings are very similar. So, yeah, if you're commissioning a reference sheet for the first time, don't be afraid to ask the artist kind of for their thoughts as well, and just provide them with as much reference as you can. Don't be too vague because it can be very difficult for the artist in that case. And that kind of brings me on to the next thing is in the process of doing a commission. Obviously, as an artist, I tend to send out a lot of updates, but sometimes updates can take a little bit longer. Sometimes things happen, or it just takes a couple more days. So what I wanted to ask was just kind of from a commissioner's perspective, what are your thoughts on asking for updates, and how often do you kind of think that's a good idea to ask, if that makes
Well,
sense?
well, I'll use our example when you did Felix's fursuit. So I definitely like to get updates from the artist, and that's just on this double checking where things are going and how things are going. Typically, when it comes to asking for updates and times, it can be a little bit different depending if it's an illustration or a fursuit. But it generally comes down to, or I typically will wait maybe about a week or maybe a few days, depending on what the person has said, if they had like a specific deadline or if they've gone over it a little bit too much. That hasn't really happened on my end when I've commissioned, but it's more so me wanting to double check if there's a problem that maybe I need to provide a better reference or basic colors of my Sona or character. But you definitely don't want to ask for updates too much. And I think that's one thing I would definitely stress is you don't want to peer pressure the artist or make them feel rushed because coming from a writing and photography perspective and drawing as well, although I haven't done commissions with drawing, I definitely do feel like the more you feel rushed and pressured, the more you're going to make silly mistakes as an artist.
Mm.
And you don't want the artist to accidentally mess something up of your character because they're feeling like they have a deadline crunch. And it can also not want the artist to take a commission from you again, because while customer service is very important and that definitely sways who I want to commission or not, it definitely can be the other way around. And I think
Yeah.
commissioners need to know that their behavior, their attitude, if it's negative, the artist has every right to say, no, thank you, I'm not doing this for you ever again. Or if you're being that much of a jerk face while during the commission, the artist has every single right to stop.
So obviously asking for updates, you're absolutely fine to ask for updates, but just don't bombard the artist too much. And I totally understand, like, when you're excited about your fursuit or your art piece, it's so tempting to ask as much as you can because you're just so excited. And I'm sure most people don't mean any harm by it. I've definitely had people ask a lot just because they're excited. I personally don't mind it too much, but when people start to get very kind of intense with it, it can be like what you said, it can be very off-putting for the artist. And you know, if it becomes too much and they become under too much pressure, they have every right to not do a commission for you in future. So just keep that in mind. And that brings me on to the next thing I want to talk about, which is the kind of etiquette and contacting artists. So in terms of etiquette, just sort of like how you would speak to an artist, and you know how you would maintain kind of a professional positive sort of like dialogue with them. And also I'd kind of like to ask from a customer's or commissioner's perspective, how would you go about contacting an artist if you wanted to commission them and you saw that they were open for commission?
Well, I first would say you definitely want to treat the artist with respect and being very polite with them. The first thing I would definitely say with customer service is you want to be polite and very respectful to the artist, because if you're mean to the artist or if you're rude, the artist might tell their artist friends that, hey, this person is very mean, very rude, don't take commissions from them. And you definitely don't want to build a reputation as someone with a negative and sour attitude when it comes to art commissions. When it comes to contacting artists, it really comes down to how the artist wants to be contacted. So I would typically follow that. Now, if the artist doesn't have a specific way they want to be contacted, usually I will note them either if it's on Fur Affinity, DeviantArt, or DM them on Instagram, and I would ask if they are currently taking commissions at the moment, and if they're not, completely cool with that and all right with that. But I've definitely taken the mindset that if I want a commission from someone, it never hurts to ask if it's unclear if they're currently taking commissions. But at the same time, if a artist says, hey, I'm not doing commissions right now, you don't really want to bother them. When it comes to etiquette and contacting artists in general, I mean, you want to be very polite. You want to be very respectful. It's kind of like a double standard because, I mean, if you like an artist and how they do their commissions, you have to definitely think that, oh, as from the artist, how do they like you as a customer, and do they want to do a commission again for you, and just make sure that you want to be that customer they want to work with again, because everyone wants to be treated with respect and with kindness.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I have quite a few returning customers, some of them friends, some of them just customers, people who've had a lot of commissions off me or had quite a few commissions off me. And it's always really nice. So when I get a message from them asking for a commission, it's like I kind of feel like I know them a little bit. So I know that they're nice people to work with, and it really does make a good impact on the artist when you are just polite and just nice. And I've even ended up becoming friends with people from getting along with them, from doing commissions. But I mean, that's another topic altogether. But in terms of just staying professional and just being polite, and it really doesn't hurt to just like what you were saying, if you're interested in a commission and it's unclear if they're open or not, it doesn't hurt to just drop them a polite message. One thing that I will say is if you are going to do that, make sure that they'll know what your message is about. So maybe put the subject interested in a commission, or just if you send in a DM on like Instagram or something, just say, hey, I'm interested in a commission. Was just wondering if you're open. Instead of just putting hi, because I know quite a lot of people don't respond to just hi messages. I personally do, just because I don't mind talking to people, and also often it will be for a commission. But just as a general piece of advice, it's a good idea to make it clear what it is that you're contacting them for. So if it's a commission, just say so. I'm sure most artists will be fine with it.
Yes.
And also keep an eye on their page and like look at their about info and just see if they're okay with being contacted, or if I know some artists prefer an email. Some have actual quote forms. So just go off what it looks like they want you to do on their page. And yeah, so hopefully that makes sense.
I think that makes a ton of sense. And I think we covered everything. Am I correct? Did we leave?
Yeah,
Did we
I think
accidentally leave
so.
something? Yep. But that is all for.
I think we covered everything.
Yep. But that is all for today's episode of Fluff It. Thank you so much for everyone who has tuned in. And we hope that we helped a little bit with the commissions and the artist perspective. And the commissioner's perspective, it can be a little tricky when it comes to the commissioner's perspective, or even the artist's perspective when it comes to stuff like this. So hopefully we helped a little, or at least this was entertaining at the very least.
Yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed listening to this. I feel like often you'll kind of hear one side, so you'll hear from the artist's perspective or the customer's perspective, but it's very rare that I've heard anything that kind of covers both. So hopefully some of you will have got something interesting out of this, and maybe learned something, or maybe just found it entertaining to listen to. That's what we aim for. So I hope everyone enjoyed it.
But until the next episode, stay fluffy and have a fantastic day.
We'll see you all soon. Goodbye.
Goodbye.